Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. Who is Friedrich Nietzsche? Born in Aachen, Germany, into a puritanical religious family, Friedrich Nietzsche, the son of a minister, became one of the most influential and outspoken critics of religion, particularly in Christianity, and he mounted one of the greatest attacks ever on traditional morality. Nietzsche's work spans philosophical polemics, poetry, cultural criticism, and fiction, while displaying fondness for aphorism and irony. Prominent elements of his philosophy include his radical critique of truth in favor of perspectivism, a genealogical critique of religion and Christian morality, and a related theory of master-slave morality.
I will be reporting on slave morality. So under slave morality, we have two concepts, which is slave morality versus master morality and its innate qualities. So first we have slave morality versus master morality. So slave morality, this comes from the oppressed groups and values humility, empathy, and helping the weak, often in response to dominant values. It's like being kind to others even when it's tough. Master morality, this is from the ruling classes and focuses on strength, power, and individualism. Think of it as might makes right. So to further expound on the slave morality, according to Nietzsche, developed among oppressed and powerless groups in society, it is characterized by values like humility, meekness, and empathy, often arising as a reaction to dominant values of the time. These values prioritize the well-being of the community, the weak, and the suffering. Nietzsche saw Judeo-Christian ethics as an example of slave morality, with concepts like the meek shall inherit the earth and turns the other cheek. In contrast to that, master morality is associated with the ruling classes and emphasizes values like strength, power, and its individualism. It's often connected to ancient Greek and Roman ethics, where concepts like honor and excellence were prized. Nietzsche critiques slave morality for suppressing individual desires and ambition, leading to what he perceived as a herd mentality. He believed that these moral systems played a significant role in shaping the values and culture of society. So we have the innate qualities of slave morality, which is humility, empathy, and resentment. So to expand on humility, those subscribing to slave morality tend to value modesty and selflessness. They see strength in being meek and unassuming. Next, we have empathy. Slave morality emphasizes compassion and cares for suffering and weaker members of society. Next, we have resentment. So Nietzsche believed that slave morality often arises from a sense of resentment towards those with more power. This can lead to a desire for revenge or revelation of values. Next, under master morality, we have strength, noble virtues, and aristocratic values. So number one, strength. Master morality is characterized by an emphasis on strength, power, and dominance. Those who follow this moral code seek to assert their individual and influence. Noble virtues. So Nietzsche associated master morality with virtues like honor, nobility, and excellence. These values are often upheld by ruling classes. Last, we have aristocratic values. Master morality is often more like to be found among the aristocracy or ruling classes who view themselves as superior. So, all of this, it is important to note that Nietzsche's characterization of these qualities is not a judgment of their moral worth, but rather an analysis of their prevalence in different moral systems throughout history.
Nietzsche referred to Christianity as the most fatal and seductive lie that has ever yet existed because he believed that it teaches a nihilistic view of life and promotes a slave morality. So what does he mean by nihilistic view? Nihilistic view is defined as life is meaningless by Friedrich Nietzsche. And according to him, Christianity teaches that life is meaningless, that the only true happiness is found in the afterlife. This, he believed, he undermines the will to power and the pursuit of excellence. It also leads to a culture that is weak and resentful. Nietzsche also criticized Christianity for promoting a slave morality that values the weak and meek over the strong and powerful. This, he believed, undermines the values of courage, strength, and creativity. And Nietzsche believed that Christianity has suppressed the natural instincts and desires of human beings, leading to a life denying asceticism. This, he believed, has contributed to the decline of Western culture. Now the question is, does the decline of the Western culture what pushed Friedrich Nietzsche disagreeing Christianity, or was it because of his bitterness of what's being normalized by Christianity as to being unnatural? Nietzsche criticized what he perceived as the suppressive nature of Christian morality because its emphasis on otherworldly values and its impact on individual freedom. So another question here is it because of is this book does him agreeing that life is meaningless in Christianity because his freedom is, it is attacking a sense of frustration. So is this his coping mechanism? Nietzsche also wants to say that Christians suffer from a spiritual malady, which is weakness. He said that life is meaningless, but he also said that life is a sentimental weakness, which is essentially appropriation, injury, conquest of the strange and weak, suppression, severity, obstruction of particular forms, incorporation, and exploitation. Friedrich Nietzsche said that life is an exploitation because he believed that all living things are driven by a will to power, which is a desire to become stronger and more dominant. This will to power leads to conflict and competition, as individuals and groups strive to assert their dominance over others, which is very common to us now. Even the organization within which, as was previously supposed to teach that the individuals should treat each other equal, this is also their definition of a healthy aristocracy or a living organization. But Nietzsche said that the idea of living without exploitation is also like living without organic or natural function. So for Christianity, what's natural to them, for Christians, is that living without organizations and natural functions, they call this as the works of flesh. So I think that is why Nietzsche said, Nietzsche doesn't agree to Christians because their teachings are not to exploit life, which also means that to embrace the unnaturality or inorganic mode of life, wherein for Christians, they call this, just like what I said, the works of flesh. He said that Christians have this idea that exploitations belongs to a depraved or imperfect and primitive society,
But for him, exploitation belongs to the nature of the living being as a primary organic function, which he considered as a consequence of the intrinsic will to power, which is precisely the will to life. So will to power equals will to life, and that is what he calls exploitation. So Nietzsche agreed that this exploitation is a natural and inevitable part of life. In order to survive and thrive, living things must exploit other living things. For example, the predators must kill and eat their prey, and humans must exploit their natural world in order to produce the food and resources that they need. Nietzsche did not necessarily see this exploitation as a bad thing. He believed that it was a necessary condition for life itself. He also believed that the will to power was a positive force that drove individuals and societies to achieve great things. However, he also acknowledged that the will to power could lead to violence, oppression, and other negative consequences. And these all, he called this the fundamental fact of all history.
So, Nietzsche is not really interested in Christian ideas, but rather, he wants to know why Christians hold these beliefs, and in this book, he will therefore attack the psychological constitutions of Christians. Nietzsche really does want to say that Christians suffer from a kind of spiritual malady from weakness. Nietzsche believes that Christianity is anti-life, weakness, neurosis, and unnatural. So it's quite a judgment. So we are here to know what is Nietzsche's reasoning behind these bold claims. And Nietzsche's critique on Christianity boils down to what he called, with a French term, resentment. I am gonna read snippets of Nietzsche's work. That which is so astonishing in the religious life of the ancient Greeks is the irrestrainable stream of gratitude which it pours forth. It is a very superior kind of men who take such an attitude towards nature and life. Later on, when the populace got the upper hand in Greece, fear became rampant also in religion, and Christianity was preparing itself. Christians and Jews during the days of the Roman Empire were an oppressed, powerless people. When they did not succeed in taking the worldly material power they desired, they instead changed to their tune and made a virtue out of their lack of power. The powerless in society cope with their lack of power by convincing themselves that earthly power is not worth it, or even that power is evil. What really matters is that not this world, but the world beyond the afterlife. So, generally speaking, Nietzsche wanted to say or wanted to tell us that Christian worldview is focused on self-denial and sacrifice. So, before, what the Romans called good, Christians started to call bad, and vice versa. So, for example, when the Romans praise military might, Christians praise peaceful resistance instead. When the Romans praise money, Christians praise poverty. Romans, a prideful people, disgusted the Christians who instead preached humility. When the Romans embraced hedonistic pleasures of life by having plenty food and sex, Christians advocate for fasting and for sexual abstinence. For Nietzsche, Christian view is the complete opposite of the natural state of the world. And he also said that it is a morality of the weak for the weak. The Christians claim to not want power by preaching humility and poverty, yet they still desire power just the same. They just choose not to go about it in another way, in a dishonest, deceptive way. This is the essence of the French term ressentiment. The Christians are envious of Roman power and they want it for themselves. Yet, they cannot get it, so they seek to compensate for this lack of earthly power by preaching a spiritual kind of power instead. So, fast forward a few thousand years back to Nietzsche's own time in 19th century Europe, the slave morality seemed to have won people all over Europe, and it seemed to regard that Christian values of humility, poverty, pity, and devotion to the spiritual world as the supreme good, and they distrust the material world while also distrusting earthly power. So, to wrap up, Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century German philosopher, had a complex and critical perspective on Christianity. So his views on Christianity are primarily outlined in these works. So Nietzsche criticized that what he saw as the passive, otherworldly, and life-denying aspects of Christian morality. He believed that Christian values, particularly those of humility, meekness, and turning the other cheek, were detrimental to human potential and strength. So he famously referred to this as slave morality. Nietzsche also argued that the Christian church throughout history had been instrumental in establishing a moral framework that served the interests of the priestly class. He saw the church as a tool for controlling and subduing the masses through guilt and fear. Nietzsche also proposed a transvaluation values, where he believed that society should reject Christian values and replace them with values that celebrate strength, creativity, and individualism. He called for a re-evaluation of moral and ethical principles. Nietzsche also had a concept, which is the concept of the eternal recurrence, and it challenged the Christian notions of an afterlife. He suggested that one should live their life as if they would not have to relive it infinitely, making this life all the more significant, as opposed to counting on the rewards or punishment of an afterlife. Nietzsche also introduced the idea of Übermensch, or often translated as the Overman or Superman. This concept represented individuals who could transcend traditional moral values, created their own meaning in life, and live authentically without relying on external religious or moral guidance. Nietzsche's views on Christianity are often considered controversial and are open to various interpretations. Some see his critique as a challenge to complacency and a call for personal responsibility, while others view it as a rejection of religious and moral traditions. His writings have had a profound impact on philosophy, theology, and cultural criticism, and they continue to be subjects of extensive scholarly discussions and debates.